Welcome to another episode of the Structure Talk podcast. Today, we've got a listener request. We had Richard write in when we were talking about ideas for what we want to talk about this year. And one of the requests we got was to talk about fire safety. Why not get a fire safety expert on the show, talk about some of the concerns with newer houses, different building techniques, things that people could do to make their houses safer. And I think this is a great time of year to cover it. We're in the dead of winter right now, and this is where people start using a lot more space heaters. I think, now maybe I'll be corrected here, we got an expert on the show. I think you end up getting a lot more fires during this time of year, but Tessa knows somebody from a previous life who is a great person to have on the show. Tessa, why don't you introduce Sue?
Okay, thanks, Ruben. I am so excited today. We have on Sue Gardner. She is a longtime friend of mine that I met through Habitat for Humanity doing builds. And she and I have worked together on several different houses for years now. And she is just one of the best humans I know. She's got a huge heart. But she's also one of the coolest people I know, too. So, Sue, we'll let you introduce yourself, but just a quick warm-up so our listeners know. Sue was the first female firefighter for the city of New Brunswick. So, congratulations, Sue. And you are recently retired, but you spent how many years as a firefighter?
18 and a half years with the city of New Brunswick's fire department.
18 and a half years. Okay.
Wow.
Long time.
We have a department of about 95 firefighters. At one time, we did have 3 females, but now they're down to 2 because I retired. So we got to get those numbers up.
Okay. So one thing that we're hoping to cover, Ruben, you set it up nicely, some of the topics we want to talk about today, but hoping that you can just kind of give us some insights and some tips and tricks to make us safer in our own homes and things that we can do to try and avoid fires, or if there is a fire, what we can do to make sure we can get out safely. So that's some of the stuff we're hoping to talk about today. But one thing, Sue, just to start this off, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your career and what you did for the fire department, what your job looked like?
Sure. Like anybody who first enters the fire department, we're all probies our first year, so we get to ride on all of the different apparatus. There's New Brunswick had 3 engines, a ladder truck, and a rescue. So what they try to do your first year is rotate you to train on each one of those apparatus, so that way you know what to do when you're on that apparatus during your scheduled shift. We have 3 engines, and 2 of them are standalone companies, which means that all they have is an engine inside the house, and they're spread throughout the city. New Brunswick's about 5 square miles, so we try to position them so that there's always an engine responding to a call and getting to a call within 5 minutes. So, because as we know, with fire, time is of the essence. So if the faster you can get there, the less damage that's done, and the more property you can preserve. So having an engine company in various areas of the city is really important. We only have 1 ladder truck, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting, if you will. They do the search and rescue. They'll do heavy machinery. If there's motor vehicle accidents, they carry the tools. Not excavation, but
excavation.
Extrication.
Extrication.
Yeah, it's an
Thank you.
Yeah, one of those X's. The heavy, the jaws of life, the spreaders, the cutters, airbags, stabilizers, all that stuff is on. That's all ladder work. I didn't do too much on ladder work. A lot of it was you want your bigger, taller people doing that, and I'm only 5'2", so a lot of the shorter people just by chance tend to spend most of their careers on engines. We're a little more effective. We get into little tighter spaces and things like that. And in New Brunswick, we have a lot of old houses, so there's basements that are low ceilings and crawl spaces and things like that. So I spent just about all of my career on engine. I drove for about 15 years of my 18 years. So that's what I mostly pump fires more so than I went in them.
Okay. So you've seen a lot of fires over the years. And to follow up on Ruben's question, would you say that this time of year, winter, is when you see more house fires?
Yep. Yeah, he's correct on that. Because of people using space heaters, even fireplaces, but more so the space heaters become an issue. And, due to overload of outlets, people don't realize how much they draw when you're using them, or locations next to beds, next to curtains. People don't realize that the radiant heat actually can ignite bedspreads, curtains, and also I remember we went to a call where we had an extension cord, had so many things. It wasn't the right gauge. So people think an extension cord can do anything, it doesn't matter the gauge, but the draw on the extension cord, obviously the appliance does make a difference. And I don't know if people, understand that you can't just use the orange yellow cord for everything. I mean, the orange cord for every, appliance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but you're right, Ruben. We do see more fires in the winter. And also abandoned houses where, homeless people are trying to keep warm. They just set fires to keep warm. So, that's also an issue.
Sure.
What would you say are the main causes for house fires, Sue? So space heaters would be one, but what are some other ones?
Not candles. Candles actually light them and forget that they're there, or they leave and they think it's no big deal, or knock them over. Candles are a big one. Kitchen fires, if you're going to say overall, probably where a lot of fires will start is in the kitchen, just because of cooking. There's more of an opportunity for a fire to start there. But I believe it's the candles. People aren't aware of that.
Okay.
And this was something that was really interesting. You were kind of sharing with me. We were talking a little bit before the show about the difference in how houses burn based on when they were built.
Yeah. I when I was in the academy, they showed us this video of a room with old contents, or just regular wood, versus a synthetic material that's out there now. All the foam and vinyl and things like that. Even the siding on a house that that melts and ignites, rather than wooden shingles or anything like that. So things break down chemically a lot quicker and create gases, which then really ignite the fire and get it rolling really quickly. So in this video, you can see that the contents of an old house or old room furniture, like 20 minutes before the room's completely involved. Whereas if you go into a room today, within 5 minutes, that room can be completely involved, which is why time is so important when you're fighting fire, at least nowadays.
Yeah, you sent us a video beforehand, before doing this. Tessa and I both had a chance to watch it. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. But with the newer materials, I think it reached flashover. And I think that flashover, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that the point where everything in the room starts on fire?
That is correct. Yeah.
I think it reached flashover in like 3.5 minutes. Mm-hmm. But then for comparison, you had the other room, and it took like almost a half hour for older construction to reach flashover. I mean, what a dramatic difference that makes.
Yeah. And, you
may not know the details, but is that a lot of that because, like, just not even the furnishings. The furnishings are different. And like you said, the newer furnishings, ignite faster, but the actual construction of like the old growth lumber in the walls versus like a buffalo board or OSB and all of that too. Does that play into effect?
Yeah. I mean, they've tried to be more fire conscious with, different types of ratings for, sheetrock and, where fire stops and things like that within the construction of the walls, so it doesn't travel so quickly and things like that. But, I think when it comes to that it's the contents that really set everything going, and the room can still be intact. It's the contents that really, make it hot and flash over quickly, more so than the actual structure of the room.
Now, I got a question for you about that, Sue, because you may or may not be aware. I don't know how familiar you are with building codes, but there was a big change that happened in the building code at a national level. We adopted it in Minnesota, where they no longer allowed thin little pieces of lumber to be used as floor joists. In the past, you could use a thin little webbing. It would be called like a manufactured floor joist or a truss joist, something like that, where you've got basically just a half-inch piece of plywood sandwiched with a couple of pieces of wood at the top and bottom. and you can't have those exposed anymore. Now, if you're building a new house, the only way you can use those is if you cover the entire basement ceiling, or at least most of the basement ceiling. You got to cover that all with drywall. It's either that or you use traditional lumber. And the purpose for this change was to protect firefighters, because the concern is that they go into a house and the flames would eat this stuff up so fast that you would have firefighters going in and then the floor would collapse underneath them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this was a huge change. Have you ever had any experience with that, or known any coworkers? I don't know if you call your fellow firefighters coworkers, whatever you call them. Have you ever known anyone who's experienced something like that, where the floor drops out on them?
Yeah, we've had guys, with that were on the job before me. That I mean, the thing about firefighting is you take calculated risks. So I was telling Tessa a little earlier about truss roofs and truss floors, and they're solid construction and they're sturdy. However, they're not fire friendly at all. And gusset plates will fail, within minutes of them being exposed to heat and fire. So then causes a collapse. Which for us, response time is really important, and also knowing when a call comes in. The call comes in at like 10:20. If we get there at 10:25, we know that fire's been burning for 5 minutes. Truss roofs usually will collapse like within 20 minutes of them burning. So we know we don't go on a roof, or we know if we have truss floors, we're not going inside. Things like that. But yeah, and it's funny you should mention that, because on one of my habitat builds, because they didn't use the correct, I think we were supposed to use a 2x10, and they used a 2x8. We had to then sheetrock the entire basement ceiling because it wasn't fire rated. So we do have some codes here that they're trying to be better with it, and also we also got denied a CO because we didn't have the fire rated fiberglass insulation around the ductwork. So they're trying, but it's a slow process. We always say that if they just sprinkled everything, things are quite expensive, and in cold climates.
So expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very expensive.
All right. So shifting gears a little, I want to ask you about smoke alarms. We've talked about those extensively on the show. I want to hear what you have to say about them and different types. I mean, as a firefighter, I've never really heard a lot of firefighters get into the difference between ionization and photoelectric. Usually the approach is have smoke alarms. It's not so much concerned about which type, but just make sure that you have them. Do you have any solid opinions on this?
I think it's always appropriate to have whatever smoke detector you have, depending on whatever that room or floor is going to be used for. We always, something is better than nothing. I do believe that as well. And sometimes when, instead of doing smoke detector and then a CO detector, get a combo. What's the harm, right? Overkill's never going to hurt you there. I don't have an opinion about, the types being the photoelectric or the ionic, whatever.
Ionization.
Ionization, that's it.
So you always try to make sure that people have smoke alarms that are up to date. They're not expired. They're installed in the locations they should be. But then you also want to make sure that that family has like an escape plan, right?
Absolutely.
And they know how to get out and where to meet.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you're on a ranch or one story, escape isn't as crucial, because if you can get out a window, you're only going to go down a couple of feet. But when you're on, second and third stories, you really need to have a plan. And, and some of the things that you can do, we have ladders that can go and drop down, have them in bedrooms, because people assume that, we'll be able to get out. But if there's a fire in the hallway of an upstairs place in the hallway, you're not getting out through the stairs. So you're going to have a different method of egress, which would probably just be a window. And if you are prepared with a ladder that you can just, throw down and you outside your window, it's never going to hurt you to have it,
Do you have any recommendations for types of ladders to use? Because as a home inspector, I'm familiar with your typical ladders that are not collapsible, or maybe one that is, but they're not convenient for something like this. So what would you recommend that a homeowner keeps in their house, upstairs in their
Sure.
bedrooms, if they've got
At Home Depot or
two-story house?
Lowe's, they have, First Alert has these ladders with the hooks that just hook right onto the windowsill and just drop down. And it's just basically a strap, and it just falls down. And they will vary in price from $35 to $100. The 100 being if you have to get a third story, like a one that's a little bigger. Then, because getting a 2-story ladder in a 3-story home is it's going to leave you a little short from the bottom. So, and teaching your kids how to use them, and also making sure that that the weight, that they're able to handle the weight, if in case you can't help them, that they can do it. And practicing is important, because no one wants to have to figure out how to do it when you have to do it. It's just like, okay, we've done this before. This is what's happened. I mean, in the fire service, that's all we do is practice, practice, practice. So, it becomes just routine when we pull up to a fire. Okay, we're grabbing a line, we're going in, or we have to do this. We grab the tools we need when we see a situation. So same thing in your home. You always want to know, okay, if this happens, then I can do this. So fire extinguishers, I don't, it's never bad to have them in rooms. I mean, everybody thinks, oh, well, by code, you have to have them in the kitchens, right? But it's always good to have them upstairs on every floor, because a little candle starts somewhere in a bedroom. You have it. You don't got to run down to the kitchen or where did I put it? Most people have a linen closet. Throw one in there. Yeah. It's not going to hurt you. Things like that. I would stay away from anyone that's made of a rope, only because if you don't use it, they can start to deteriorate. Most have metal rungs, and just check them. Like you would do anything else, inspect them. But I think the most important thing is to practice and go over that with family members so that they know. I mean, if you're in a town with a volunteer fire department, it's going to take a little bit longer to get there, because they still have to get to a house, get on a rig, and then respond to the call. If you're lucky enough to be in a town with a paid department, we're coming as soon as we get that call. So, that's another thing to consider. If you're in, somewhere out in a rural area, you definitely want to be able to get out of your house.
But, oh man, talk about how fast it happens. I mean, I'm in a town where we have a paid fire department, larger municipality, and there was a house, it was about a little over a year ago, where they had these solar lights in the yard, and something went wrong with one of the solar lights, like the battery charging thing went wrong. You can't have lithium ion batteries on planes and whatnot. And they had something go wrong. It was a super windy day. It caught the wood chips on fire in their yard, and it spread to the house. And my son got home from school at like 3:15 in the afternoon, got dropped off on the bus, and then maybe 5-10 minutes later, I see this commotion in my street. We go outside, and the back of the house is engulfed in flames, and it's vinyl siding.
There you go.
You talk about how fast that goes up. It was unbelievable. I mean, we saw it. It kind of went to the deck, and from there, it just engulfed the entire backside of the house. Quickly went inside. There's flames coming out of the roof, and I mean, the fire department was on their way immediately. But by the time they got there, the whole house was engulfed.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Wow. So, I mean, even when you got a paid department, that with the speed of these fires today, it is just crazy.
Absolutely.
How fast you can have a total loss for a house.
And here in New Brunswick, we have houses that we will say exposure problems, right? They're either connected or there's like a foot between each house. So if the house, even if your house isn't the one that's on fire, it soon could be. So, it is amazing, and that's one of the concerns. And sometimes we have to pull up and you go, okay, the house that's on fire is the house that's on fire. We have to stop it from getting to the other houses. But, it is amazing, from the time you get a call, it'll be smoke showing and you call up and it's like the house is completely engulfed. And, it's funny, in older structures, like an old church, fires can be burning for hours before they actually, but because of it's pure wood and the diameter of that wood, it takes so much longer for it to actually show itself. So,
Yeah.
but that, look at the construction we have now. It's very thin wood or particle. There's a lot of stuff there. I saw I-beams that
Yeah.
were made out of just like, it looked like OSB board.
Chips. Yeah.
Yeah. And the glue heats, that's it. That I-beam is done. So.
Yeah. No,
I bet
you
there's a
talk
lot of
about,
houses. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I bet there's a lot of houses that you go to, Sue. It's a newer construction and you can't go in. There's
Mhm.
nothing really you can do. But if
Right.
it's an older house, there's a chance you can save it still.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen fires that we've had in old houses where you go back the next year and they have rebuilt them because they're still good bones. The bones are really
Yeah.
good. And,
Yeah.
and the damage is not as bad, but the newer construction, you'll see the roofs cave in so quickly. And that's it. Once that does, and then that's just fire damage. Forget about the copious amounts of water that we pour on there.
oh
Yeah.
my goodness, yeah.
We used to say we
Yeah.
make parking lots and swimming pools, So yeah, if you don't get there quick enough, you're going to have one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. What other tips would you have for people just on fire prevention? I mean, we talked about space heaters. If you're going to use the space heater, I mean, obviously follow the instructions on the space heater to a T. I think most of them say like nothing within 3 feet of the front of the space heater, but what else do you got on that?
I would say if you have a space heater that's 10 years or older, consider replacing it, especially if it's older.
Okay.
I was telling Tessa, I have an old space heater that draws so much. When I plug it in, I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't. So, depending on what you have as far as, available amps for it, it can trip things. And a lot of them now just have so many safety mechanisms. If it tips over, it shuts off.
Yeah.
Some are on timers, so people can't fall asleep and, I didn't know, they'll shut off if it's, not attended to in a couple of hours. So I would definitely say that, spacing is a big one. And also if you have anything that's super old, just get rid of it and get something that's more current, just like, smoke detectors, they try to make them so that it's idiot proof, only because not that people are idiots, but accidents happen. So,
Sure.
I think that's a big one. As far as
Extinguishers. What do you think about those fire blankets that I've been seeing like a lot of
Oh,
commercials for those recently?
yeah,
Where they're used to smother a fire. What do you think about those? Are those good to have?
yeah, I have a bunch actually. So
Oh,
these are
do
good.
you?
Yeah, these are good for kitchen fires because people will think right away throw water, and we know that's the biggest mistake, right? And even if you can keep away from using a dry chem, because now your stove is when we had restaurant fires, the Board of Health has to come in. Everything has to get recertified when you use a dry chem on those things. So the fire blanket is made of like a Nomex, which is what the turnout gear is made of. And if you can, take this, you can see it's really kind of large. And, it's good in the kitchen. Something's happening, throw it over. It completely covers. Or you can also use it as something that if you got to get by an area, down a hallway, you can use it as a shield to protect yourself to get by an area that may be, on fire, or, I wouldn't say completely run through fire, but just, a room where, because, it's not necessarily the fire that's going to get you, it's the heat and smoke. So, and if you can somehow get out of there before it gets too hot or too smoky, you got a better chance of surviving. And sometimes, if you've ever just put your hand over a candle, that's hot. So imagine just trying to run by a fire in a house with no protection, and your clothes, it'll stop your clothes from possibly catching, things like that. So, fire blanket, it's a newer thing that's out there. Some people will probably dispute its efficiency, but I think it's not a bad thing again to have. And and I think it's about $25 or $30 for one. And if you buy them in bulk, they drop down a little bit. They were Christmas presents for my for my family. So Because I
Nice.
just think, if you don't have an extinguisher, or some people don't think about it, they have them in these pouches that you can hang on the wall. So it's always, in your eyesight. So definitely good for a grease fire. If you can't
Yeah.
find the baking soda or the lid to the pot. Um, but
Use the blanket. Yep.
yeah, exactly. So
Okay, so you're a fan of those.
yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
yet to use it, but I'm hoping I don't have to be honest. But I think I am going to try maybe a little test thing outside, just to see, even if I get a little
Oh.
controlled fire and throw it on there, and I can
Uh-huh.
keep you updated as to if its
Yeah.
efficiency.
Take a little
But
video for us.
okay,
Yeah.
we'll do. We'll
Now,
do.
now, how many garages have you found on fire because they were trying to deep fry a turkey and it was too windy? I deep fried a turkey once in my backyard and it was so windy that it would never get hot enough. The oil wouldn't get hot enough. And all of a sudden it clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is why people put them in their garage.
Yeah,
and then it gets too hot. Then it sets the garage on fire. I mean, for me, I made like a plywood barrier around it to keep the wind away. But
Of course you
I
did.
could see why people put them in their garage. How many times have you seen that happen?
actually, not a lot. There aren't too many
No,
people that use the deep fryers here
That
in
sounds
Nebraska.
like a Midwestern thing.
What
Yeah.
what actually
maybe.
what happens with us is that people decide they want to have Thanksgiving dinner and they haven't used their stove or their oven like all year. So you've
Oh.
got dust in there. Kids stick their toys in there. I mean, and they just turn it on to preheat, and next thing you know, you got this smoke condition and plastics burning in the oven, and that
Sure.
we've come across a little bit more. And the big thing about it's funny because you were very persistent with you're thinking, okay, it's too windy. No one was it's too windy. I can't do my turkey, right? Right. They're going to bring it in the garage. You're going to find a way, or
Yeah, you got
build a
family
wind
coming over.
barrier.
Like, you need to
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah,
This is a big
exactly.
deal.
But people also don't know
This
that you
bird
can't
will
stick a
get
frozen
cooked.
turkey in those things. They think like, oh, we'll just drop a frozen
Oh,
in the hot oil. That
yeah.
causes it to overflow into the fire. There you go.
Sure.
So
Okay.
that's another one if you don't think about that. But and
Oh my gosh.
most people, yeah. I don't think people think ahead like the what ifs. You guys being in the field that you do, you see a lot of stuff that happens if people don't think about what ifs. So your show is
Yeah.
really good in helping people kind of just be aware, and right down
Yeah.
to I've listened to you guys. Your what kind of tools, what you should have. I really like that you did the episode on the must have tools, because my dad was a mechanic, so my dad's thought was I have to have every tool. you know,
Sounds like
Love it.
Ruben.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
How,
love
no,
the drill and the ladders. It was great.
oh, thank
Very.
you.
Okay, we should probably be wrapping this up soon, but I wanted to ask you, Sue, if you have a really good story that you want to share with us, and it could be about anything, a crazy fire, a miracle, or a good learning, experience, anything that strikes you. I know you've got 1,000,001 stories.
Oh,
I've
now
heard
you
some of
put me on
them.
the spot. I got to think of one. Eh,
Sorry to put you on the spot, but leave our leave leave our listeners with one good story.
it was when I first got on. We do these things called pre-plans, right? So you go around the neighborhood and you look at different structures that might be iffy or abandoned, especially, and that okay, if a fire is going to start here, what's our plan of attack? And we had this. It was my first fire actually, so it was this old dry cleaner. It was called New Systems, and I remember that we had gone out like my shift before, and we pre-planned. So, and what that is okay. This is in engine one's area, so they're going to be the most likely the engine that's going to be putting water on the fire. They call that first due. So you're going to be the first due engine. Then ladder's going to come in, and they're going to come in from here, and then you got engine 5 where they're going to come in, and where engine 2 is going to come in. So we do that. So it's kind of like almost like a dance, right? So everybody kind of knows where you're going to be. And you can count on them being there, and water supply, manpower, that kind of stuff. So it's just about shift change, 6:30. We get this alarm, and we hear possible structure fire. So the bay doors go up, and we just see the smoke. So we're like, oh boy, we know we're going. So because it's not far from the firehouse, so we go out and we're going the way we said, because it was the building that we actually pre-planned. That was the ironic thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we go, and our driver, I was hanging on at the time, and usually what happens is the two guys, you have your driver, your officer, and then your third man and fourth man. And your third man and fourth man are usually the people that are the two guys that are going to take the line inside with the officer, or one will get off and hit a hydrant and then catch up with the guys, because the hydrant's usually about a block away or so. So being that was going to be my first fire, I was supposed to go in with my officer. But we had stopped, and our fourth guy, who he was going to hit the hydrant, he thought we were at the hydrant. So he jumps off, and then we continue to go, but there's no hydrant there. So
you didn't practice that part.
So then, as we're pulling down the street, the officer turns around and he goes, where's Kenny? I said, Kenny's over. He's running after the rig because he had gotten off too soon. So now I have to hit the hydrant because now we're stopped to hit the hydrant. And so then I hit the hydrant, and then and then I just had to follow the line back down. But that was probably, things that are not supposed to happen that happened. But we made do, hit the hydrant, and then I went down and caught up with my officer. And because it was a building that actually had burned before, it's completely involved. It was surrounding drown, so nobody was going to go in anyway. But yeah, that's what happened at my first real fire. So.
You look back in the rearview mirror, and there's Kenny sprinting down the sidewalk.
Yeah. And you look like Rocket Man with the pack on and everything. Yeah. So I don't know if that. I don't have a scary story because, like I said, I pumped more fires than I actually went in. I had a few good ones. My first one, I remember being very nervous that I was going to mess that up, but it's about taking your time, and to reiterate with fire safety, with the practicing of having an evacuation plan, having the equipment to execute the evacuation plan, having a meeting place, checking your smoke detectors, making sure you have extinguishers in the right places and the right class. If you have a metal shop, you don't want to use, you want to use one that's for metal, things like that. Just those things. So I don't know if that.
Don't use space heaters from the 1950s.
Right, exactly. Yes. You definitely want to update your space heater situation there.
Yeah.
Make sure it doesn't draw too much on that line. So.
Okay. Well, perfect. Thank you so much, Sue, for coming on the podcast on Structure Talk. It was really great having you on, and thanks for sharing some tips and tricks too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue. Great to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Likewise. Now I can put a face to the voice, so it's awesome. And you guys keep doing what you're doing. It's good stuff.
We will. And for any listeners out there, if you got any thoughts, questions, concerns, show ideas, please email us. We read them all. It's podcast@structuretech.com. And I'm Ruben for Tessa Murray saying thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.